Welcome to another episode of the podcast Window to the World, Okno, sveta. My name is Miroslav Wlachovský. I served as a foreign minister of Slovakia in the year 2023, and currently I work at the Globsecu think tank in Bratislava. My today guest is Ambassador Dr. Emil Brix, Director of Vienna Diplomatic Academy, former Austrian ambassador to Russia, and my former colleague in London when I was there as a Slovak ambassador. So, Emil, welcome to our podcast. And I will start with you. How did you become interested in international relations? You had a long career in the Austrian diplomacy, but what was the trigger? What was the motivation for you to become interested in international relations?
Miro, first, thank you for the invitation to this podcast. Actually, it was my realization as a student that Austria has become quite isolated in the 1980s when the Iron Curtain was still up. And the idea was, when we look into our history, it was different. Austria was different. Mm-hmm. So I realized it's not enough to study history, as I did, and possibly also not only diplomacy, but foreign policy, really, to get involved in that. And that's how I stumbled more or less into diplomacy, because I went with some of my friends to the countries, from our point of view, behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. So I went to Czechoslovakia, I went to Hungary, to Poland mainly, also Yugoslavia, and to talk with dissidents there, how we can help physically and mentally. And that's brought me into the diplomatic work. And then I had the right friends who said, you should work in this field internationally, and possibly Austria has a chance to be in this Central European spirit again, especially after the Iron Curtain came down. So I really began with the fall of the Iron Curtain.
And who was an inspiration for you? Did you have some mentors? You are now director of academy, so you know how important it is for young people to have good examples and someone who helped them.
No, absolutely. I was lucky. I had Austrian mentors. First of all, my professor for my PhD in history. He asked me, what do you would like to do? There are thousands of professors, university professors, but only about 100 ambassadors of Austria. Mm-hmm. So choose wisely.
Okay.
And secondly, I had political mentors. And the funny thing is, I am from the liberal conservative side of Austrian politics. I had two mentors. One of them was our, at that time, chief whip in parliament, Alois Mock, who then was a foreign minister at the time of the fall of the Iron Curtain. And when we joined the European Union, Austria joined in 1995. So he was a mentor. I worked for him actually in parliament. And at the same time, I had a more liberal mentor, which was Erhard Busek, which was at that time deputy mayor of Vienna. And we together talked about how can we recreate this atmosphere of Vienna 1900, when so many intellectuals came to this place and developed modernity. And Erhard Busek was the one really who brought me into this idea that we should not only talk about it, but do something. We wrote a book already in 1986 called Projekt Mitteleuropa, Project Central Europe. We had no idea that the Iron Curtain would fall. Certainly, we hoped for it, but we were not sure. And we worked there with some dissidents like George Konrad in Hungary or Adam Michnik in Warsaw. So I really stumbled step after step into diplomacy.
And when you joined the Austrian foreign ministry, you worked in the field of cultural diplomacy, if I remember correctly also. You've been the director of all the Austrian cultural centers.
That's true, yeah.
You know very well the soft part of the diplomacy, but also the hard one.
Yes, that is true. For almost 10 years, I was Director General for Culture in the Austrian Foreign Ministry. But even before that, when it was possible to work with our neighbors in the East, I was more or less part of the idea to bring Austrian libraries to these places, to re-educate Russian teachers in the East Central European countries, and to open new Austrian institutes. And I myself then more or less opened one in Krakow, already end of 1989, beginning of 1990, and later on in London. I worked as director of the Cultural Institute there. So the cultural part of diplomacy has always been something in which I believe and which interests me also because I think there is a chance for smaller countries to be attractive and also to create a bit of space of power for them if they are credible in the field of culture. That's why we are so much into it, and I would recommend also our neighbor countries also to invest more in cultural diplomacy, including Slovakia.
I hope that they would listen to you. They don't listen to us sometimes. I completely agree with you on that field. But now, you are a director of Vienna Diplomatic Academy. You are getting closer to finishing your term as a director. But tell us more about the institutions you are currently running. What is the Vienna Diplomatic Academy as one of the oldest institutions about?
Well, it's about educating people for something in international affairs. We don't know what it will be.
Okay.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
But it was from the very beginning like that. This is, as you said, it is the oldest still existing academy of its kind, opened by a woman, Empress Maria Theresia, 270 years ago. So in the middle of the 18th century. And the reason for opening this, and that's important, I think, is Austria had one opponent or enemy at that time, and that was the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And the problem we had that we educated our diplomats only on the job, without anything in preparation. The only thing we did, we sent them to Istanbul for education. And you might know what happens if you send your young students for diplomacy to your enemy. Many of them became then get on the payroll of both sides, the Austrian and the Turkish one. So the idea was very simple, that we had to open something where you educate. But it was more than 50 years after the siege of Vienna when the Turks for the last time came to Central Europe and tried also to invade Vienna. And the Austrians had already fought for long in the Balkans, and it was very clear that there's no military possibility now. And the idea of the Empress was that actually for that we need to understand them now, because we need them to make partners and to trade with them and do all these things. So the very beginning was the idea, the Habsburg monarchy needs dialogue with its main neighbor, and that was the Ottoman Empire. And how do you do that? And there is a soft diplomacy already in the 18th century. Everybody had to learn the languages of the region, Turkish, Persian, Arabic, and everybody had to get into the culture of these people, into the minds of these people, by translating lyrics from the famous Persian poet Hafiz, but also from Turkish. And many of the students here and professors here started to write on the history of the Ottoman Empire. Our possibly most famous alumni was called Josef Hammer Burgstall, and he's until now the one who has written the most extensive history of the Ottoman Empire. And that was more than 200 years ago when he wrote this. So the idea was start with languages, start with understanding the culture. And that's until nowadays one of the priorities of this academy. And the second thing is that I'm proud of here, because it's special. We never closed our history department.
All right.
In all
that's
these
very
years.
Good.
Because the idea out of the experience of an Austrian was always, without understanding what happened and why it happened, we will not be able to create the future. And I think that's one of the attractions that we can offer here, that we have still this chair of history. The way of teaching history changed. It's now global history, but also geopolitics in history and things like that. But hugely important to do this.
I like it very much because it's in fact very much in contradictions with the times we are living now, which are instant, and we are bombarded by news. But we are lacking somehow the ability to go deeper. And as you said, to solve the problem, you have to understand what is the core of the problem, what's behind it, what are the roots, what is the history of it, and in many cases it's lacking simply. People are very shallow in their analysis of especially complex international issues.
Yes, I agree, and it's not so easy for the students here, because they have on the one hand to try to take in all the traditions and forms of cultural expressions, and on the other side they have to be brilliant academically. Mm-hmm. That means also working. Everyone has to work here transdisciplinary. So if we take something from the legal field, he has also to study international law, but also international economics. He has to study history. He has to study politics. And that makes an excellent mix. So our students have a background from all sorts of ways of life. We are a graduate institute, so we are lucky. We take only those who already have a degree. Most of our students have a bachelor's degree, but sometimes they already have a PhD if they come here. That makes the work easy, and we offer for at the moment, a bit more than 200 students, almost 90 professors. That's a very good relation, and so we say we can deal with them on a one-to-one basis almost.
And the academy is financed by the state?
I would love to say that it is financed by the state. Right. We are a capitalist country, a Western capitalist country, with a lot of democratic problems that I have always to negotiate not only with my government.
I see.
My government is giving me, if I'm lucky, 1/3 of my budget. 1/3.
All right.
And 2/3 comes from study fees and from sponsors and from the way that I can get money in our public events that we organize here. We have about 200 public events here in our rooms on international affairs.
So you are also a fundraiser.
I am also a fundraiser, and as you know, this is always the boss's job to bring it in. So, and I'm always trying to tell my government that you have such an asset here with a diplomatic academy with students from 66 countries, and they remain committed to their alma mater for the rest of their academic career, at least, or political career.
Yeah.
And we know this academy in the 1990s educated everybody who was young and politically interested in the Balkan countries, everyone.
All right.
And many of them are now the leaders in the Balkans.
Mm-hmm. That's a good investment.
Good investment. That's what I'm telling them. Very good investment. I'm not saying that it helps much in some cases, but it's very good investment. And when they come to Austria, most of them also come here, give a talk, have meetings here with us. And that's excellent, because there is this relationship between the academic excellence, the need for diplomacy, and the need to understand what happens in international relations and in foreign policy. And that's what makes this place really special, because you are prepared really for international affairs. But as I said, we all don't know how international affairs will look like in 5 years, 10 years. So you have to be very open and to concentrate more and more on skills like empathy, how you develop emotional intelligence, psychology. These sort of things have to be included in our curriculum more than it used to be a long time ago.
So it's not just academic; it's very practical, or preparation for a real diplomatic life. And you can teach them from your experience quite a lot. Who are the students? From which countries are they coming from? Are there students from Slovakia? We are neighboring countries, I guess. There are some.
Yes, you're right. There are some students from Slovakia. At the moment, only one. But for example, for the coming study year, we have quite a good number of applicants. We get about up to 1,000 applicants a year for our master program, mainly for our master programs, which are 2-year programs. And we can take in every year about 110, 120 people out of this bigger number. So we can really choose.
It's 1:10 ratio, basically.
Yeah, from those who are interested, and yeah. And we try to make sure that we get from all continents and with different academic backgrounds.
I see.
That's important for us because the experience for a student is similar then sometimes to the experience when he has an academic career or a political career or media career. He needs to be able to speak to people with a different background. So the social interaction with people which have such a different background is very important. So it used to be the case that, as you know, in diplomacy, it was a legal business 100 years ago or so.
Yeah.
In Austria until 20 years ago.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And now it's open to any academic field. There are exams then if you want to join. We also have exams for some of our programs, entrance exams, but it's really open for everybody. For some of our special programs, we get technicians, we get medical doctors.
Interesting.
Yeah, so because there is no job in the world now without international relations. Every job you can have after your academic education has an impact on something. We try to prepare them for that, but the basis is the academic excellence.
So, if I am interested in study in your diplomatic academy, what should I do? What should I write, and what are the conditions for me to enter your program?
The most important condition is you must be interested in the world, but formally you need to have an academic degree. As I mentioned, from any field, we are checking then sometimes with an interview, sometimes with the material that you send here to the academy, whether we can accept you or not. We are interested in diversity, diversity of fields, of background, because the experience that's the best preparation for diplomacy, really. I remember the Foreign Service in the United Kingdom, they always had so many archaeologists in the Foreign Service. And I wondered, we had this legal background in Austria still, how they can manage. And they said, well, otherwise, we do not understand what's going on. And they partly they meant possibly history. Right. Archaeologists have the experience, but partly they meant the different backgrounds, to bring them together. Yeah. And that's what we are also looking for. So one should not hesitate if one is an archaeologist to apply here. But we're looking for academic excellence. So that's important. And we believe that languages are important. So English is our working language here at the Academy for everybody. And we teach also other languages. We have permanent departments for German, French, and English. But we give our students the chance to learn any other language that they want to learn extra. They get credits for this.
So do you still keep Persian and Turkish?
Yes, not here at the Academy, but in Vienna we can arrange that, and we pay it out of the study fee. So that's, but now it's more Chinese and Spanish, actually, I would say, which is popular. But this is important because we think languages opens worlds, and if you want to be well educated, you need this simply.
So you don't believe that we will manage with artificial intelligence translations
No, the Austrians tried in the 19th century with this sort of artificial languages, because the idea was that everybody around the world should have the same language. There was a language called Volapük, but there were also others. There was an Austrian language. We even have a museum for this language of artificial ideas that came out of the multinational Habsburg monarchy. The idea was, if you have one language, which is not being like, for instance, in some periods of history, then it would work. It never works. It's not only about language, not only about communication, it's also about emotion.
Yeah, and it's about the whole cultural background, which goes with it. And that's what never will be done by machines. I do believe that.
I fully agree. But we have a new program, master program for digital international affairs. Because that is for sure true. If you want to be successful and understand what's going on in the international field, you have to be digital, a digital native. So in this program, our students learn how to compute, they learn how logarithms work, they learn how to hack.
They learn how to hack. That's great.
They learn how to hack. Well, if we have to defend ourselves in case of cyber attacks, and they happen, as you know. Yeah. So they have to understand what it means.
Let's talk about the biggest challenges for the EU in general and Central Europe in particular. We are living in an era of disruption, changes, challenges to the world order. We are facing the biggest war in our continent since World War II. I mean, Russian aggression against Ukraine. But we are also facing the situation when our traditional ally, who guaranteed European security for several decades, I mean, United States, is not that much interested in keeping it in the same level and in the same mode. They are telling us for 20 years that we have some other parts of the world we have to cover, so you should take more responsibility for that in the Europe. So there is an enormous pressure on Europe from both East and now the West, and then we have also the whole issue of the competitiveness of Europe, and we discussed it before our meeting that it's not one of our strengths currently. We like to think more about the work-life balance than about how to compete with other major international actors. So how do you see it, the current situation, not as a director of academy, but as a Austrian diplomat who had this fantastic opportunity to see Central Europe from both West, from London, but also from the very East, from Moscow.
From Moscow, yes. I'm not sure whether it's because of my work in London and in Moscow that I'm totally convinced that we have to act now. I think if Europe wants to survive as a project, integration project, it has to act now to find ways to act more in unity. It's absolutely necessary. And I like the way the French approached the issue. Emmanuel Macron, in his famous speeches, Sorbonne and other speeches, he always said, don't be afraid, don't wait, and let us not be divided. Act now. And we all know the French are good in rhetoric, less good in implementation, convincing others. But he is right. And he has been saying this now for almost 10 years, I would say, since he became president. And this is a crucial moment where it will be decided whether there's a future for European integration or not. There are alternatives. And as we know, some political parties are gaining ground in Europe on these alternatives, nationalistic alternatives, or regional alternatives. Or looking for different big partners than we have now. And it's really, the question is, do we have a model for us, for how we want to live? We want to live as a community, which is US, Russian, and Chinese. And the majority of Europeans is not yet convinced that there is a common model which is different. From the US, okay, we always say it's actually we are a welfare state. We know how to treat people well. Mm-hmm. But when you look into the suburbs of France, or when you look into the backyards of eastern Poland, you see that there is a problem also as far as welfare is concerned, including in our countries.
Absolutely.
So are we different there from the US model? Possibly yes. Russian model, on the other hand, we don't like to be similar, but we understand that there is a lot of hard power. There's a lot of military strength. Do we have an answer to that? No, we don't yet have an answer to that. Do we want to have a real answer? Oh, we don't know. We will all invest in our defense industries, but do we have the population behind this? When you ask Austrians, we have opinion polls that about 13% only are ready to defend their country.
It's very similar to my own country. It's a big problem.
I just came back from Estonia, and there you have figures like 85% who are ready to defend their own country. So again, a problem. And the third issue is China. Do we have a different model which we believe in? We thought that China won't be a problem because capitalism with communism doesn't work. But we have to realize it does work, actually. If you have state capitalism, they are quite successful. So where is the space for Europe? Where is this idea that we can convince majorities of people that our community is the best to live in and it's worth defending?
Yeah, but then you come to the problem, do we think European? Because we are so much concentrated on our internal arrangements and our internal issues within the European Union. We often forget, or at least it seems like that for an observer, that we do consume too much time and energy on ourselves. And we do not take into account that there is a big competition in the world, and we have to compete there. And I'm sorry, but in that competition, no member states is strong enough to compete. But as a united entity, we have more than good potential to work together. But I don't see that way of thinking that as a Europeans we can do it. And I see also that Russians or Vladimir Putin, if I could be more personal, he thought that we are weak, that we are not able, we are not united itself. I think he was surprised after he invaded Ukraine, how Europe can do a united answer to his challenge, but still,
yeah,
it's an issue.
It's certainly an issue, and I fully agree that this spirit of European unity is not there. And I remember the famous essay of Milan Kundera about the death of Central Europe. In the 1980s, he wrote it in the 1980s, sitting in Paris, and it became such a spark of thinking about this, because he opened this essay with an episode from 1956, Hungarian Revolution, where there was a journalist, I think it was from state television or radio, who said, we have the Red Army here, Europe is not defending us, the spirit of Europe has died, we are the last ones who fight for Europe. And it was written then in the 1980s. So there, the idea that there is no spirit of Europe, in spite of all the challenges we had in the Cold War and everything, was very obvious. But now it's totally different. This Pax Americana is no longer there, that the Americans defend us, and we do the good, cheap trading and these sort of things. It's not working. But I'm an optimist in this, for the very fact because if the danger is so big, hope grows. That's German philosophers always said this, and I think there's a truth in it. So it's now getting, at least on the political level, very clear that one has to act to save the competitiveness, the community, the identity spirit of Europe. And this is challenged, as we all know, by different ideas about identity. And I'm talking here not only from the right, which is politically, I think, the most difficult part of our political system for the coming years, but also of the intellectual left. It is a problem if you only talk about, or mainly talk about, that we have to integrate all sorts of identities into our social behavior and social thinking. Yes, but the big challenge is the community building of the whole. This you have to take into account. Neither the right nor the left are concentrating on the common idea of a European identity. But there we really have to work. The chance is everybody understands that we are strong. We have such an economic power still. We have the people to do it. We have good education.
We have money. We have pension funds.
We have money. Actually, as we all know, we even spend more on the military than Russia, by far more than Russia does, and still it's such a strange situation. And we have these power forms of norm and regulation. This has two sides again. If Europe is overacting in this field, we are not competitive in many parts. But if we use this norm setting for the idea that it makes sense that we have common global norms on specific issues like, I don't know, like environmental protection issues, climate issues, but also how we trade with each other and things like that. But even how we diplomats should work together. You know, the major documents have been prepared here and signed here in Vienna in the 1960s about diplomacy and consular relations. If we use wisely this normative power that Europe has, there is a chance to do something. And the last point is really, I guess Europe has the best chance with its system to make people accept that we have global issues to take care of. This idea of how can we save our environment, how can we make sure that we survive in the climate change situation, to make sure that, as we all know, that we will never have a world governance, but still can possibly have an order which is functioning a bit more than the United Nations system now. But I'm sorry, Miro, but if the Germans sent as a president of the UN General Assembly, not an experienced diplomat, but they sent a former foreign minister, she had been controversial as a foreign minister and controversial also in the selection process in New York. What can you expect? How can we expect that in this case, we can really reform the UN system as it would be necessary, if we act like that? So, a lot to do for Europe. And if even the Germans don't understand it, although they are the ones who came out of the Second World War with the idea that we built up Europe together with France, even if they don't understand that this is a common endeavor, I could be skeptical, but as I said, I'm still optimistic.
At the beginning, you said we have to act now, and I share with you this feeling of urgency. But I'm not sure it's common in Europe yet. That they think it's so urgent as it really is. The danger is here, and if we will not act now, we could be basically too late, or we will not be able to stop the disintegration forces within the European Union, because there are other views, as you have mentioned, and they say that we should make basically European Union back as a custom union, and that's enough. There shouldn't be too much of a political power against the nation states, even though those nation states agreed at the European Council to all the norms. They're representative. It's not like there is some European body which decides about all of us. But how to make this feeling of urgency more visible, more permanent in political thinking and decision making?
It's not a question of what we should do. The question is really, how can we create the political will in the member countries to do it simply? And this depends on leadership in the member countries and on the European level as well. The leadership issue is something which is highly difficult in Europe because of the idea that you have to make so many compromises in a democracy. In a democracy, we've had so many different minorities, or you have to make compromises all the time. And as we know, democracies are slow, and it's difficult to get to really strong answers. You've been foreign minister, I guess. You experienced it in many meetings in Brussels, how difficult things can be. But if we don't have leaders who can convince others that they should follow them, it will not work. How can we educate them? Well, possibly they could come to the Diplomatic Academy to learn a little bit, but actually, in a more serious tone, it's really about to create a generation of young people who understand that their future will depend on this European unity, on the idea that we allow ourselves in Europe to become an empire.
Yes, but the compromise, the very word you used, became a dirty word in many occasions because the idea is that I have to be so much strong in my values and in my value system, and I have to be so devoted to my bubble of people and communication circles that I should not reach out for compromise with others. The very word which for diplomats is quite usual, that we have to come to compromise. In the political sphere, it became more difficult to make compromises or to acknowledge that it was a compromise, and we actually have to reach the compromise.
Yeah, that's the problem of our identity bubbles. As you said, if you speak to your own bubble, you have to stick to your narrative. And we all live in a time of narratives which compete with each other. And there it seems to be all about truth.
Yeah.
And as we diplomats know, diplomacy, for instance, is not about truth. It's about finding a common way forward. There are many truths in this world. Allow me even to say this idea of universal human rights. I've met so many people in the global south who say these are your Western universal human rights and ideas. And this is a colonial thing. So we have to understand how this situation is, and not create the illusion in our narrative, universal human rights, and we have to implement them everywhere. There are other ideas around, as I said, I think the UN system at the moment is not in a good shape to organize this situation, but it needs to be. So I think we have to work as Europeans to be strong in global governance issues, work in the UN system as much as possible, try to make sure that the Americans are still on board. Very difficult on that. Possibly the Chinese are good partners for this global governance. I don't know, but possibly they have an interest, an economic interest also, and then on the regional level, we have to become competitive by becoming something like a good empire again. And what empire means, you have really at the end one voice which speaks for this empire.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Kissinger saying there is no telephone number.
Yeah, I know.
He can call it Europe. So that's necessary, really, for an empire. Secondly, it has to have the power of creating norms, rules, and regulations. That we have, actually. We do a lot. Also, the rule of law. And thirdly, it doesn't give sovereignty to its members, because the sovereignty is more or less centralized. This is an empire, and it can guarantee, it gives security to people. And there we have a problem. The European Union is now trying to work on controlling its outside borders better than it used to, but still it needs more than that. And secondly, we have to find ways to integrate those who live on this continent. There are no good examples in the history, really, how you can do this. But possibly Vienna is an example. Many of our politicians, prime ministers, have all Czech names or Polish names.
Oh yeah, I remember.
That's
I remember.
Because we integrated their families about 100 years ago. So this sort of integration is very important if you want to be successful.
Well, then one has to mention also the tradition of the Holy Roman Empire, because that was an empire of a lot of sovereign, smaller states with one emperor and with a lot of compromises and a complicated constitution.
With no central power, finally. The Habsburgs were most of the time the Holy Roman emperors, but there was no power in it. There was no real power in it. So the power element is the central element of any empire building. And we Europeans are not used to talk about power. That's because of what happened in the Second World War or even in the First World War. But the language of power is not something bad. It's only the question how you exert your power.
We have to relearn that quite soon, because otherwise we would be taught by others. I mean, Russians are clearly challenging the European security system. They are destroying the European security system after Second World War and Cold War. They are not satisfied with how it is, and that's. I think what we see in Ukraine is just a manifestation of that will of a revisionist power to retake what they think they belong to them. And we shouldn't.
Yes.
No one should think about that. It will end with Ukraine. I mean, it's clear they have other plans. They would like to have a European Union which is weak, and our answer should be to that challenge. And the first, there are two issues which I feel like a pressing one. One is how to organize European Union as a defense community, as a security community, and the other one is how to finish the job, how to do the enlargement.
Yes. No. The defense community is a long-term project, as we all know. For a long time, the issue was a NATO issue. But now it becomes more and more a European Union issue. And more countries are talking about a common European army, not only talking about the NATO. We all don't know whether there will be European sovereignty in NATO possible, what the Americans will do there. More European input into NATO is unavoidable, must happen. And including my own country, Austria, we are partners with NATO, but not members, which is because of the expression of our population, majority of our population. But I think it will, for all European countries, it will be clear that the common defense system is necessary. And I can tell you, I met Mr. Putin on many occasions.
Yeah.
And I always had the impression he was always aggressive, more or less, aggressive in the way that he wanted something and he expressed it clearly. Mm-hmm. And if he felt weak on the other side, he was pushing, pressing, going on, not stopping.
He has to hit the wall.
Yeah, it's unfortunately this is the case, and That's why I'm not against the economic sanctions, but that's why they don't really work. Because it's, as long as Mr. Putin can sustain his power in Russia, in spite of these economic sanctions, he doesn't care whether it's good or bad for his own people, unfortunately. So the only way is really to show strength. And I fully agree with your second point, that it's about Europe, that we have to defend Europe here. What Ukraine is bravely doing has to have our support as much as possible. Even from a neutral country like Austria, we cannot get directly militarily involved, but first of all, morally, fully on the Ukrainian side. Secondly, we are certainly also contributing to the support system, humanitarian one, but also the non-lethal military side of support. So there is no question, and this is the majority position that we have in our not only government but also in parliament. So that's clear.
So the security defense debate in Austria has changed in the recent years. Not as dramatically as in Finland and Sweden, though, which joined NATO. Is there any prospect for you to join?
We have good neighbors like Czech Republic and Slovakia and Hungary. So the Ukraine is far away, and Russia is even further away. So it has to do with geography, because of no common border with Russia, that we have a different position. And it also has to do with a different historic experience. You have to remember the Russians were the only one who left a Western country like Austria after the Second World War.
So you've been the only country, yeah.
10 years after the end of Second World War, they left Vienna, the eastern part of Austria, and there is this tradition of being neighboring empires throughout centuries, and in most cases we were either friends or we actually traitors against each other, like in the Crimea War in the 19th century, but still there was some sort of respect between Russia and Austria. So the idea that we join a military alliance like NATO is, for the time being, out of the question. But our politics are quite clever. We work with NATO as if we were members. As if we were members. It's very close to that. And this we can do because we are members of European Union, which also already reduced our status of neutrality.
Of course. You are not politically neutral anymore.
We had to change our constitution even for that. We have got one exception, like the Irish, an Irish clause because of our neutrality. But it means that we are able to politically interpret what neutrality means the way we see it necessary from the security point of view, which is good.
Yeah, we somehow didn't manage to integrate Western Balkan countries yet into the European Union. How do you see that? What are the prospects, and what are the feelings in Western Balkans? I know that you travel there quite often.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you know the term enlargement fatigue.
Of course,
that was around for such a long time. It's not at the moment. It's not enlargement fatigue, but it's the lens of our interest has turned away from the Balkans to a certain extent. It's hardly on the plate as an issue because of certainly the Russian war in Ukraine, but also other things, also what the Americans do. And I think what we should really do is now, first of all, try to negotiate as good as possible with each of the candidate countries in the Balkans. Support from our countries, which are so supportive of the Western Balkans, support these practical steps. Continue also invest into rule of law, education, the judicial system, the civil servant education as much as possible. We do this also a little bit here at the academy, but also in other institutions in Austria. And secondly, work with to convince the bigger countries in the West about why we feel that it is necessary to integrate the Western Balkans. That includes now talking to the people from the Trump administration, how the Americans can help us in this process of bringing them into the European Union. Because we all know that Mr. Trump is not a friend of Europe, but the American political elite on both sides of the party system, they still believe in Europe. And they still believe that it's important to do things like including the Balkans, because otherwise the Russians, the Chinese, and the Turks will come to the Balkans even more than they are now in there geopolitically. So there is a chance, and one by one, I'm still optimistic that Montenegro, for instance, could be the first from these candidate countries, and maybe already in 2028. The president of Montenegro was here, and he gave a talk. Mm-hmm. He was here because of the opera ball.
Okay.
Yes, the Vienna
Another
opera
attraction
ball.
of Vienna.
Yes, of Vienna. And he was very convinced that in 2028 Montenegro could be. And as we all know, this is not a problem of facts, because a small country like Montenegro can be integrated tomorrow. But it's about the symbol that we have to give to these countries.
Yeah, because the hope is dying there because of the 20 years of waiting.
But I'm fully against this idea of political community. Sort of around Europe is a ring of fire, and because of that we have to create a political community. Zones of influence is another term actually for political community, which is a French idea, as we know, but it is totally wrong to my mind. We should be clear about which country we feel we want to be integrated, become member of the European Union with full rights, maybe after a period of transition, mm-hmm. as we all did when we joined, but full members or not members, and not create some sort of gray zones where countries like Russia can tread easily.
Yeah, they can still exercise their influence because we allow them, because we do not treat our future members as an equal. I completely agree with that. I'm thinking about Americans because it always was the country I served my first diplomatic post, and I like Americans. I think in the elites they still do recognize that Europe is natural partner for America, and actually America cannot act alone all the time, or it's not good for America to act alone, and then the natural partner is Europe. So I think for them it's a good investment, because there's no other relations America has like with Europe. But somehow the European Union became, in the eyes of American president, the big competitor, and he always seems to think in a not in a win-win but lose-lose kind of thinking.
And he's using his people are using the argument that Europe has lost its values. It had lost the values of family, the values of religion, and all these sort of things. And only if you support the right-wing rising political parties from the American side, you can possibly accept that Europe is on the right track. So there is in the Republican surroundings of Mr. Trump, there is a lot of feeling that Western Europe is decadent, simply. So that's why they meet each other with the Russians saying Western Europe is decadent.
Yeah, well, hearing that from Russians is really really strange, and we can discuss a lot why the Russia has no right to say decadent about Europeans, but that's for another issue. usually ask at the end of our podcast episode our guests, what would be your recommended literature for our listeners and viewers? What would you recommend as books, either from English or German or podcast?
Yes.
About the topics we have discussed.
First of all, I would invite your listeners and viewers to go to the website of the Diplomatic Academy.
That's a good start. Yeah.
Because we have so many social media channels there. Mm-hmm. We have podcasts and YouTube live stream presentations, because most of I would say many of our public events we put also on a channel, YouTube, Facebook. So there is a lot to follow there. Hundreds of things by now, I would say, on all issues. We just talked yesterday about that we have a series, Big Rivers in Conflicts, about this idea how the fight over water mm-hmm. and the river as a border plays a role in international politics. We have an episode on Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, between Mexico and America. We have something on the delta of India, Bangladesh. And we have one on not yet on the Danube, unfortunately. Not yet on the Danube.
Thanks God, it's not a case of Danube.
We have one on the Nile, because the water issue between Ethiopia and Egypt. Uh-huh. So on our channels, you find these sort of things. So that's what I would recommend. And our students have their own podcast channel. So my recommendation is that your listeners go to podcast /rec, REC, because there it can be found on any podcast channel. Actually, you find what our students have to say on international relations. Mm-hmm. Because we try to bring them also to create stuff which can be interesting for the public. Yeah, and it's very good for them. But as far as another website I would recommend. It's a rather new institution, the Brussels Institute for Geopolitics. I'm not sure whether you know it. Luc de Middelaar has been the founder, a Dutch historian and friend of Van Rompuy. Mm-hmm. And it's excellent. It has a website and a newsletter, Brussels Institute for Geopolitics. It can be found on big -Europe.eu. big-Europe.eu.
Okay, I will check it out.
Books, actually not. I don't like this. People who write within months after something happens already, the final book on the issue. That reminds me a little bit of the end of history of Fukuyama.
Okay, I see.
Like he failed with what he said. One book which has to do with the idea of what border mean in international relations is from a writer, Italian writer, Italo Calvino. Mm-hmm. Italo Calvino, it's called Invisible Cities. Die unsichtbaren Städte. One can find it in many languages, Invisible Cities. And it's about how each place has its own memory. But not only one memory or one identity, but many identities. Mm-hmm. And he tries this with Italian cities in a very poetic way, but saying we all have dents. Because if we walk on the streets look different after we walk there, and things like that. It's an excellent book if you want to understand borders, identities, and memories. And then, as I mentioned during the podcast, Milan Kundera, certainly, A Kidnapped West, The Tragedy of Central Europe. Again, one can find it in English, in French, and in German. It's from 1984, which is really still up to date. It's interesting. It's called A Kidnapped West. And maybe one more book. In this case, it's from a Bulgarian and from a British, Ivan Krastev and Stephen Holmes. Mm-hmm. The Lights That Failed. Mm-hmm. Why the West is losing the fight for democracy. Mm-hmm. It's quite a skeptical book, But that is the way that Ivan Krastev analyzes all the time international politics in Financial Times, in Economist, everywhere.
Unfortunately, Ivan usually have a very good data.
Yes.
Accompanied his skeptical views.
Yes. But I really recommend this book because it does also give us some ideas of how it can be saved. I could certainly mention my own book with Erhard Busek, Central Europe Revisited, but we wrote it 2018, 2019. So it was before the decision of the full war of Russia. But we already said at that time, if Europe is not listening to different experiences of the Central and Eastern Europeans, and if we do not manage to integrate their views into a common European project, we have a problem. But we thought the main problem is about Europe, European integration, and we didn't think that it's Russia. Mm-hmm. That would really attack Ukraine the way it did. But still, I think it's an interesting book. It's a reflection on what happened really since the fall of the Iron Curtain to our region, and why we should shape the future of Europe.
Well, we should shape the future of our own region.
Yes.
First, it's complicated enough with upcoming elections in Czech Republic, with recent elections in your country and the upcoming elections in Hungary. It has changed quite a lot, and it shows the dynamics within the Central Europe, but also how much polarized we are. And how to make out of this the positive force for the European project. That's the challenge for us.
Yes, that's the challenge for us. Yeah, but we have to
deal with it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And I would hope that sometimes we will repeat this experience. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.